We're now honored to be joined by a member of Congress, Representative Daniel Lipinski, who will be introduced by Tom Rudin in a moment. But I want to say Representative Lipinski is a colleague of ours. He's been a strong supporter of everything we're talking about here today under what I think are challenging times for the U.S. Congress. Tom Rudin is Director of the Board of Higher Education and Workforce here at the National Academies. He will properly introduce the Congressman and moderate our session. Thank you very much, Congressman, for being here. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Neil. And we're honored, actually, to have Congressman Dan Lipinski, who represents the 3rd District in Illinois. He's in his 7th term. He's the ranking member of the Committee on Research and Technology, the Subcommittee on Research and Technology of the Committee on Space, Science, and Technology. He's meeting with us in between a committee markup and a lunchtime commitment, so we're honored to have him here. We're going to move right into a couple questions from me, but then we really want to hear from you and get your comments and questions for the Congressman. This is an issue he's very passionate about. When he was chair of the committee, he actually wrote the bill that reauthorized the National Science Foundation. So he does care about these issues and is quite passionate about them. So, Congressman, we've had a lot of conversation this morning about the level of commitment to research and education in this country these days. There's concern about that. What's the appetite now in Congress for investments in research and investments in the kind of basic research that obviously the folks in this room and you also care deeply about?
Well, first, I want to thank you for having me. I was very interested sitting here listening to the last panel, and a little bit of my background. I have 2 degrees in engineering, then I got a PhD in political science. So I was yes, I know it's a very odd background. So I was an assistant professor, and so I have lots of my own ideas about the tenure process. I never got that far, but I have a lot of, interest in understanding of universities, having spent many years in school and then as assistant professor. So, I came to Congress really. I wanted to go on the Science Committee first and foremost, because of the National Science Foundation. I had an NSF grant when I was a graduate student working on my dissertation. And I've seen a great change, unfortunately, in my 13th year on the committee. I've seen a great change in, first of all, the real commitment to funding scientific research. And it's not particularly... I thought I shut that off. I tried. It's not specifically going after scientific research as much as a real focus on we can't spend any more money. And I'm a Democrat, and I try not to be highly partisan, but it is the Republican belief right now in general. I think in general there's a value of scientific research, but we have great, terrible budget deficit. So we've seen over 3-4 decades, we've seen stagnant, maybe a little bit of increase in scientific research funding. But over the last 5 years, it has gradually gone down. Now, what has been specifically been the target in recent years has been climate research and also social science research, which as a political scientist is something that I've fought a lot against. So I'd say there is I don't think scientific research is particularly under, attack except for in those 2 areas, but I think all the federal spending is under attack. And so that has really, unfortunately, caused a diminishment of federal investment in research, which I think is, in those of us, many of us are trying to make the argument all the time. This is, looming disaster for our country. I was just in the Science Committee markup where there's talk on both sides of the aisle about how our country's commitment since World War II to research has really made our economic prosperity possible. You know, not just be the world leader in science and technology, but in general, our economic prosperity. And I think that's something that we are putting at risk through short-sighted thinking about this.
Yeah. I'm going to open this up in just a minute because we have until about noon with the congressman, so we want to field your questions. I'll ask one more question, though. What's your advice to the university research community? What would you say if you had a room full of people who care about higher education and research, which you do? What's your advice to us? What should we do? What are concrete steps we can take to sell this idea that there is a significant return on investment to scientific research?
Well, first thing, let me just say, I've been very involved in getting not just the university community, but bringing together universities, industry, federal government on a number of programs to really say, what can we do to get a better return on investment in our research, which has been something that's been very popular. I was a big proponent of the Innovation Core program. The NSF started to teach entrepreneurship to university faculty and graduate students and bringing in industry there. In the Small Business Innovation Research Act that we just passed, I was able to get Phase 0 funding, which I was able to get that in 5 years ago for NIH, meaning that there are 3 hubs that were established at universities to help people at universities who had ideas that they thought might be able to be commercialized. So I was able to expand that into more beyond NIH in this recent bill. So there have been things and I think I've seen a lot of positive things where we have universities understanding that they need to partner more with industry, and then bringing the federal government in as part of that partnership. I think it's extremely helpful as we move forward. If you are, specifically for universities, you really need to reach out to your members of Congress, and first of all, places where you are, where your representatives, your senators, reach out, try to invite them in, let them know, or come to Washington, let them know the great work that's being done. Now, the easiest thing to convince a member of Congress about is something that you can point to that is directly impacting economic activity. So you can, essentially tell your representative, these are jobs. This is what we are producing. Now, an issue then becomes basic research. You also need to make sure that, even though I've been involved a lot in the aspect of the technology transfer, basic research is something that we certainly cannot abandon. So making that connection, explaining what basic research has done in the past, in order to, without that basic research, we could not have developed so much of what we've developed and have the economic prosperity, technological innovation without the basic research. But it's really, you've got to reach out to your representatives because they care about they care about home, and they care about what's going on there. And they may not, I tell you, most members of Congress do not understand universities. They just don't. They don't have the experience. They don't really know what's going on. And especially if you're a Republican, you see them as a bastion of liberalism and liberal thought. And, I'm just being honest, you've got to really show them what's going on. And the changes, even since, changes in the last decade at universities has been tremendous, because I think universities have much better understood that they need to get more active in being involved with industry. That's part of what the mission is. And you go back to National Academy of Sciences, these last two reports. That's sort of we're talking about that. That's part of how do the universities contribute to our nation, and it's in so many different ways. And I think there's a lot of members of Congress who don't understand all those aspects. They think about, okay, you're teaching students, and that's all they really think about. So
a better job of outreach and telling our story directly to members of Congress. Thank you. So questions, sir, if you identify yourself.
Stephen Fleming, University of Arizona. Mr. Chairman, first I wanted to thank you for your work in establishing I-Corps, Innovation Corps, first at NSF and elsewhere. I was one of the first people that helped Errol Arklick put together the first two nodes for that, so had a big part of it for the last 7 years. I really do think that it has changed the conversation and is beginning to change the culture with researchers around entrepreneurship. My concern is that it seems to have convinced a lot of people that economic impact from universities means entrepreneurship. And you can actually have a lot of economic impact through working with larger corporations, more established corporations, and there's been less focus on that. Any thoughts on perhaps a new version of I-Corps to work with more established companies?
Well, I think that there are, as with anything, there are potential problems of shifting too much in one way. I've Innovation Corps. I mean, there's been nothing in my 13 years in Congress that I've been more proud to be a part of, and I'm very, very glad to hear your testimony on that. I think that I think it depends on where you are at, maybe where the program is located in terms of whether it's just entrepreneurship, separate from established industry or not. I think that this is something that right now I'm working on legislation. We have a hearing in early December on Innovation Corps and what's next, and part of that is bringing in industry into the Innovation Corps, so established companies into this process, so you could better make those connections between the university, the research faculty, students, and the already established companies.
We'll go here and then back over, please.
Ida Chow, Society for Developmental Biology. I know that the legislation is still being considered, but does the Congress understand the need and the damage that it would be given or be done to the students, graduate students, if tax is put on the tuition waiver? Because the bulk of the workforce for all this innovation, basic science and beyond, comes from work from graduate students, including teaching assistantship. So is that being taken into consideration, the consequences?
That's something, last night I just saw the very beginning of Speaker Paul Ryan was on, and it must have been Fox, taking questions on tax reform. And the first question was exactly about that. And he tried to explain away that this isn't going to be a problem. Honestly, I want to look and see what the numbers are. I kind of doubt it. I don't think there's an understanding. Again, I was one of those graduate students. And so I know if you're going to start taxing everything, including the tuition waiver, that's going to be extremely detrimental to the ability to even have graduate students, or what the universities are going to do on that. And I don't think, again, I think that's one of the many things, because this bill was rushed so much, there's not a clear understanding of. We still have time. I think that's something that we all need to make that case about how problematic that's going to be.
Hi, I'm Mary Woolley with Research America, and I just want to first say that I grew up in the western Chicago suburbs. And,
whereabouts?
Was Elmhurst, actually, DuPage County. And my Girl Scout troop were advocates for Argonne. We were called the Up and Adams troop.
I like
So
that.
I've always been an advocate for science, always been an advocate. But I wanted to, in thanking you for your leadership in the Congress, ask you about the appetite that might be there or could be developed in the Congress for working toward a national strategic agenda, if you will, a vision for putting R&D to work on behalf of the economic, social, cultural goals of the nation. We've seen other nations around the world do this, but we seem to fall short on that more and more. So I wonder if you could comment on that possibility.
I think that's something that I would love to see that done, for it to happen. I think Congress really is not going to do that inside Congress. That's more something to be done outside of Congress, put something like that together. But I think it's a good idea to have Congress make a requirement, whether it's the National Academies that comes up with that, or tell the administration to do that, and maybe have it be something. I had a bill that I worked on for 5 years to have a manufacturing strategy done every 4 years, like the Quadrennial Defense Review, do something on manufacturing. I think that'd be something that would be excellent to also do in this space.
Thank you.
Let us know if we can help think that through with you, actually. That's quite interesting. Thank you. Yes.
I'm Anil Shrikande. I'm CEO of one of the companies exhibiting outside, Gemnio Bioscience. And the only reason we're here today is because we got NIH and NCI funding over the last 4 or 5 years, and now we're looking forward to the set-asides for SBIR and STTR funding so we can take our product and technology into the marketplace. But the question I had for you is whether your committee or subcommittee is considering new partnership models between, say, the national labs, industry, and universities to really keep this virtuous cycle going of federal funding going to the universities and then out to industry for economic and societal benefit. I have read about, I think it's Oak Ridge that was setting up a consortia and a collaborative arrangement with industry and universities in advanced manufacturing, particularly related to composites, manufacturing of and testing of advanced composites. Is there more thought being given to these new collaborative models that could maybe, stretch and increase the yield from research dollars from federal sources?
I think there has been, as you mentioned at Oak Ridge, some individual locations where that has been taking place and that thinking's been taking place. But I think it would be good for us to think at the federal level, what can we do to encourage that and maybe incentivize more work like that. It's good to see that that is moving forward. It also is something that I think I've certainly watched. Like I said, I've been here 13 years, and ideas coming up and are done differently. Technology transfer and what can be done to help to make technology transfer more likely to happen, to incentivize the universities looking at it. And universities there's been many different ways that universities have done this. To me, I looked at it and said, it's sort of a fad. And some things worked that some universities did. Many, I think, felt that they were doing something just to do it, to say they were doing it, and maybe it wasn't that successful. So I think it's important that we look at what has worked, and especially when it comes to collaborations like this, is look to best practices and really come up with what are those best practices, what has worked, and that's one way to do it. And there may be some other ways that I'd like to look at the federal level to incentivize that.
Please. Yes, good afternoon. I am Mohsen Mosleh from Harvard University, from engineering. And my question is that the federal government has extensive resources and allocation of funding for research in STEM. But when you look at the portion of the end users of the results, which are the company, is very, very small. Probably my university is less than 1%. But they are the end users of the results and findings of the research. Is there any way to mandate that these big corporations and companies somehow take their share of responsibilities in terms of contributing to research? And the second issue is that also because of the dissemination of results, often external entities and outside government, they are quick to jump, and if they are faster than the US in commercialization, then obviously they are taking advantage of all the federal funding that goes to STEM. So these two issues are important to really trying to develop that partnership, and not in a way of incentivizing, but in a way of mandating that big US corporation contribute to STEM research. Thank you.
Well, I think it's always tougher, especially these days, to mandate something like that. I think I certainly would want to see more participation, more contribution by corporations in this area. We need to look at sort of innovative ways in order to do that. It's not going to be mandated, but I think there's some other ways that we can look at it. This would have been a good thing maybe to look at potentially in tax reform. We still have time. It's not done yet, thank God. So I think we have that there, and I think on both of those, especially when you're looking at the behavior of companies, is what oftentimes what we do is what are the tax incentives is what we often do, and I think that's something that would be important to look at.
Final question.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, I'm April Erickson from NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and I am one of the board members for the Committee of Board of Higher Education and Workforce. I just wanted to follow up on the question of SBIR. It actually was something that I did in the many careers I've had in NASA, 25 years of experience. And the question about SBIR and how it's successful. For one, the National Academy actually did a report last year on the differences across the agencies in terms of productivity and the way that they apply or application of small business awards. One of the things I found very helpful at our facilities at NASA is that we make sure that there's possible infusion in the future, and when we look and review potential applicants for these SBIR and STTR, which includes the universities, we really make sure that they're set up for potential success. The lucrative portion is that we offer them contracts in the phase 3, and that's the real success, right? To be able to offer them contracts to actually provide the technology for our flight missions, for the success of the NASA projects that we do. I think that you have to look so much more from an individual situation for each of the agencies, because each one has a unique situation. But I'm more than happy to help you sort of sift through some of the things and how we are successful at the NASA facilities.
Yeah, I'd be very happy to sit down and talk to you about those things. Yeah, as you said, SBIR is really, we talk about it as one program, but it's really very specific, and depending on what the agency is, it works very, very differently, because the opportunities are also very, very different. So I'd be very interested to know what has worked at NASA. There are some things that we had talked about during this last SBIR reauthorization that didn't wind up going forward in the bill. I think those of us who have really looked at it know that there's probably more that we can do to make the program more effective. And so I'd certainly be happy to do that. And I want to, saying that, I would take the opportunity to say, first of all, my door is always open to you. Any ideas, I want to know what ideas you have on any of these programs, what we could be doing, federal government could be doing better. The staffer who does all this work for me is Joel Creswell, who is over here. And Joel will be staying. I have to go after I speak here, but Joel is going to be staying here. He is a PhD chemist. So he has, I've always had someone with a PhD doing my science committee work. It's very important to me. And this is something most members on the science committee are not, as active and engaged as I am in this. It's very important to me. It's something that personally doesn't matter back home a lot. To a large extent, this is something that I do out of passion because of what I believe. Argon is important, it's in my district, but I'm always trying to explain to my constituents why this is important, why this work is important. So I'm there with you, and you trying to explain to members of Congress why this is important, and investments in research are important, and I try to explain it to my constituents who don't always understand why it is. But we all know that it is, and it's critical. And we don't want to lose the future by, being very short-sighted these days. So it's the work that we all have to do, all work on this together. But any ideas you have policy-wise or anything, please come and let me know.
Congressman Lipinski, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your passion about this issue. We really appreciate it. Thank you.